Hello everyone and welcome this evening. It's fantastic to see you all here today. My name's Liz Knowles. I'm Head of Marketing for Dunedin Public Libraries, and it's with pleasure that you're all invited to attend the opening of this very exciting exhibition, Morning Has Broken, the Farjeon collection. This is really a very special exhibition for Dunedin, and in fact Dunedin Public Libraries has the world's most substantial collection of the Farjeon materials, so that's really, really fantastic and reinforces the notion of Dunedin as a city of literature. The collection held here in the Dunedin Public Libraries Heritage Collection in fact holds more than 240 volumes of the works of Benjamin Farjeon and his family. And Eleanor, his daughter, actually donated the works to the library in 1960, and that was in fact in memory of her father, but also to commemorate the up-and-coming centenary celebrations of the Otago Daily Times. So it's really fantastic and fitting that today we're opening this exhibition, especially as it's during the ODT's times of 150th celebrations, because Benjamin Farjeon was, in fact, the early manager of the Otago Daily Times. So tonight I'd also like to acknowledge all the people who have worked extremely hard to put this fine exhibition together. So firstly, Kathleen McCarthy and any of the bindery team here? Yes? Hello, Kathleen. So on behalf of Dunedin Public Libraries, we'd really like to thank you and your team for constructing all the mounts and also the captions for this exhibition. It really preserves our collection here, and it's fantastic to have that support. We also would like to thank Trina Brogan, who I don't think is here tonight, but for designing the wonderful exhibition graphics. She did a really great job with that. And also Anthony Tedeschi, who is our Rare Books librarian and does a fantastic job as well, and has constructed this exhibition with a lot of love. So next I'd like to introduce to you this lovely woman beside me, Trish Brooking, and Trish lectures at the College of Education, and Trish will open the exhibition tonight. Her expertise is in children's literature, so it's fantastic that she's able to speak tonight about the Farjeon collection. And I also had met Trish before. I recognised the name. I was thinking, how do I know this name? And in fact, she's been a great supporter of literature for many, many years, but also has helped support the New Zealand Post Book Awards, and has helped the City Library and public libraries with our secondary school quiz events every year. So it's really fantastic to have such an advocate here amongst us here in the city. So can we all please join in in welcoming Trish tonight to review.
Thank you very much, Liz, for that very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to speak at the opening of the Heritage Collection's Read Gallery exhibition, Morning Has Broken. We are extremely lucky in Dunedin to have a dedicated heritage collection and an equally dedicated staff to ensure the continued longevity of such a collection. Although this exhibition honours the Farjeon family collection, the focus of this talk will be on Eleanor Farjeon, the highly respected writer of children's literature. With more than 80 books of stories, poems and novels, spanning half a century, and the winner of many literary awards, Eleanor's output was certainly prolific. The esteem in which she is held was acknowledged in the establishment of the prestigious Eleanor Farjeon Award for Children's Literature. And the award winners, read like a who's who of the children's literary establishment. Some of these notable recipients include Marjorie Fisher, Naomi Lewis, Aidan Chambers, Shirley Hughes, Michael Rosen, Philip Pullman, Jacqueline Wilson, and our very own Dorothy Butler in 1980. So further links between the Farjeons and New Zealand. To begin, I would like to share with you two illustrations of the personal impact of the influence of Eleanor Farjeon. One was in the selection of our wedding music, when the Cat Stevens version of Eleanor's poem, Morning Has Broken, greeted our guests. And the other took place 10 years ago. We had just arrived in Oxford and taken up residence in a quaint Cotswold College in New Yat, a short bus ride from the city. The owner of the house was in Estonia on sabbatical, but his bookcase was left intact. The first book which took my eye was by Eleanor Farjeon, with not just a signed autograph inside, but a lengthy personalised message to the owner of the cottage. Additional items, authored by the Farjeons, alerted me to the connection between Dunedin and Benjamin's early career in journalism. I wallowed in these discoveries and enjoyed the further delights that particular bookcase yielded, particularly since I was working on my MA in children's literature at the time. So serendipitously, this became my own personal archive for the next few months. Eleanor Farjeon has left a rich legacy in the field of children's literature. Born in 1881, Eleanor's arrival positioned her propitiously in the middle of the golden age of children's literature, which spanned the period 1850 to 1930. Texts produced in this period often broke boundaries in some way. They were largely free of formula, and they provided something to delight the child reader. The Wind in the Willows, Peter Pan, Little Women, Peter Rabbit, and The Secret Garden are just some examples of classic titles of this canon. And I guess many of us would be very familiar with many of those. Similarly, Eleanor's work has freshness and a pert theatricality, which children find engaging. Like Beatrix Potter, she was educated at home, in the land of the governess, the cook, and the nursery. But more significantly, surrounded by the impressive library of her parents, Benjamin, former editor of the Otago Daily Times, and American-born Margaret Jefferson. Indeed, the library was reputed to contain over 8,000 volumes. Eleanor's ability to craft stories of wit with playful linguistic melody draw on her relationships with her three brothers and the imaginative worlds they constructed together. It was very interesting that her older brother Harry and Eleanor would construct this very elaborate fantasy world which would go on for hours, in their nursery. And Harry was something of an autocrat in the nursery. And he would say, "We're now Harry and Nellie again." A signal to, get back into the real world. Her London origins are evident in her publication Nursery Rhymes of London Town. Mindful of the recent seismic shock to the Murdoch Empire, centering on London Town, I thought I would read Fleet Street, followed by the Stock Exchange. These conceits on London place names were written originally for Punch. Fleet Street. In Fleet Street, the people are so fleet. They barely touch the cobblestones with their nimble feet. The lads run like a windy day, the lasses run like rain, from Temple Bar to Ludgate Hill, and then run back again. At the Stock Exchange, there's a bull and a bear, and what do you think? They live in a garden of white stocks and pink. "I'll give you a pink stock for one of your white," says the bear to the bull. And the bull says, "All right." They never make answer if anyone knocks. They are always so busy exchanging their stock. Like all memorable children's fiction, the content has appealed to both adults and children, with a similar allure to that of her contemporary A.A. Milne and anticipatory of Ted Hughes and Spike Milligan. After the publication of Nursery Rhymes of London Town in 1916, Eleanor rented a cottage in Sussex and there wrote her next two books, Gypsy and Ginger and Martin Pippin in the Apple Orchard. Many of her sources of inspiration are the folklore of the countryside, children's games and nursery rhymes and customs. Despite the English content, recognition across the Atlantic extended Eleanor's writing profile. The sensitive child prodigy had developed into an adult who retained her ironic wit, as evidenced on an occasion at the New York Public Library when she was refused admission because there was a party, and her shy protestation was, "But I am the party." Eleanor Farjeon's whimsical humour underpins her work and acts as a lens to sharpen awareness of the ideas explored in her fantasy. In Portrait of a Family, she writes, quote, "I was fascinated by the things that came and went, things I couldn't quite touch or really find out. The silver road on the sea to the sun on the horizon, the moon and her star, the rainbow and its reflection, the shafts of light drawn almost down to earth from a bright-edged cloud, the spot of light at the end of a green arcade of trees." This fascination with the ephemeral and the transient suggests links to her childhood reading of the Brothers Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen, Kate Greenaway, Mother Goose, and as she acknowledged herself, the best fairy tales she had read yet, the Greeks. The Greek legends, where at a young age she could recite in detail the 9 muses and their attributes. The huge reservoir of classical literature in the form of myths, hero legends and fairy tales, which Eleanor imbibed in childhood, helped shape her future writing. She combined traditional symbols and motifs in a variety of entertaining ways, which in turn reflect how the language of story mirrors human behaviour and aspirations. Eleanor Farjeon's poetry and prose reveal her vitality and ingenuity to such an extent that her publisher, J.S. Beresford, had this to say in the introduction to one of her earliest publications and the one with which she gained prominence, Martin Pippin in the Apple Orchard. So these are the words of Mr. Beresford, the publisher. "I was a little overworked. I had been reading a great number of manuscripts in the preceding weeks, and the mere sight of typescript was a burden to me. But before I had read 5 pages of Martin Pippin, I had forgotten it was a manuscript submitted for my judgment. I had forgotten who I was and where I lived. I was transported into a world of sunlight, of gay inconsequence," remember this was written in 1921, "of emotional surprise, a world of poetry, delight and humour. And I lived and took my joy in that rare world until all too soon my reading was done." What a response. And obviously a tribute to Eleanor's commitment to her writing. She once lamented that the worst thing about dancing with boys at parties was to think of what to say. The only thing she thought of talking about was her typewriter. It didn't seem to interest them much. Eleanor's genius as a poet, dramatist and storyteller is not unsurprising given the close-knit and intellectual vitality of her family circumstances. At the risk of some name dropping, it appears that amongst Eleanor's friends were D.H. Lawrence, Walter de la Mare and Robert Frost, and the artist whom her father Benjamin had met in Dunedin, Uncle Nicholas Chevalier, was a regular visitor. Anthony, in his notes for the exhibition, has commented on the achievements of her brothers, Harry, the eldest, a professor of music, Joseph, a crime fiction novelist, and Bertie, the youngest, a successful actor. The theatre was a significant feature in Eleanor's life, as grandfather Joe Jefferson was a famous American actor, famous for his role of Rip Van Winkle, who incidentally had toured New Zealand in 1864 and coincidentally met Ben Farjeon. Eleanor writes, "The 2 men, not so very much separated by years," in actual fact Ben was 26 and her father was 35, Joe was 35, Must have been finds for each other. Both were light-hearted and mercurial. Both loved the impulse and the fun of life. Both were magnetic. The magnetism was transferred in 1875 in London to Joe's daughter Maggie, already a fan of Ben's novels, but expecting to find a man of similar age to her father. Perhaps Eleanor's special feeling for Dunedin may hinge on this chance meeting between her grandfather and father, which yielded such a romantic result a decade later. It is interesting to note Ben's bequest that his most treasured possessions to be passed on to his elder children had New Zealand origins. The green stone for Harry and the silver inkstand presented to him in Dunedin for Eleanor. Ben held Māori in high regard, particularly once he had taught a local Māori chief to play chess, and after some months of perfecting his technique, the pupil could outplay his master. It is Eleanor's gift for storytelling and poetry which reflects her ability to see the world through a child's eyes and consequently engage with the child reader. And two examples I would like to share with you, I think illustrate, her sense of fun and her aptitude for subversion. The very best children's writers often have quite a little subversive element. The first is called Questions, and it interrogates educational practice, and George I offers a sly and irreverent version of English history. So, first one, questions. The questions they ask, it's a terrible task to answer them right, although you are quite sure you know what to say when the questions are said. As soon as you're asked them, you seem to forget. Who was Francis Drake? And where do they make the very best knives? Who were the 6 wives of Henry VIII? Why are mites and cheese? And what is the French for some more if you please? Where is Timbuktu? What did Nero do? What more is in Devon? What's 5 and 11? And who was the first man to reach the North Pole? And what was a coal mine before it was coal? Sometimes I say it right away. Other times, I just sort of know. But most of the times when the questions are set, as soon as I ask them, I seem to forget. And, this is George I. George I, when he was young, couldn't speak the English tongue. In Hanover, where he was born, he spoke in German night and morn. George, George, in England they want you for their king today. Say you will with heart and soul. George delighted said, Yowo. George I, till he was dead, still his prayers in German said. Wasn't that a funny thing for one who was an English king? To conclude, although Eleanor Farjeon's work was written half a century ago and reflects her late Victorian childhood, nonetheless it continues to delight with its own brand of enchantment. My 5-year-old grandson listens with rapt attention to Elsie Piddock skips in her sleep, enjoying the wit and cadence of her writing style. It's very interesting to note that Walker Publications have reissued this in 2000 with delightful illustrations to read. Eleanor's stories are multi-layered with text populated by fairies and mortals and encompassing a wide range of thematic content. Elsie Piddock actually succeeds in outwitting the Lord of the Manor and his expensive legal team, who are keen to assert their private ownership rights to convert public land to a more industrialised landscape. Eleanor Farjeon's interest in issues related to socio-economic conditions is also expressed in the skipping refrain, Andy, Spandy, sugary candy, French almond rock. Bread and butter for your suppers, all your mother's got. Despite her own privileged upbringing, her stories explore some of the social and economic issues of the day, foregrounded too in the work of Dickens, whom she admired. Eleanor's ability to craft text, which was not in any way didactic, reveals her respect for children and her skill in constructing musical language which reaches into and extends children's imagination. As a teacher, and like many before me, We are thankful to authors such as Eleanor Farjeon for helping children develop a playful approach to language and a love of reading, a lifelong gift. Her legacy to the Dunedin Public Library typifies this generosity. In the 1959 postscript to her portrait of her family, Our Nursery in the 90s, she refers to the correspondence with A.H. Reid and concludes with the following observation about herself. Strangely, it falls to the lot of the little girl who listened eagerly to Papa's tales of adventure amongst the Bushmen and the Maoris, who inherits the task of sending Papa on his second voyage around the world to end his career in Dunedin, where it began. The story comes full circle. Enjoy this wonderful exhibition. Thank you.